we will get the show on the road. We will start with Hong Yi, a community activist. She will be hosting Life in Minnesota section. Welcome, Hong Yi. What do you have for us today? Who do you have for us today?
Hi, everyone. Today, three local leaders are joining us to talk about how they use their influence and connections to set priorities and make a difference in our communities. Let's first, these guests are State Representative Kelly Moeller, Xie He, Executive Director at the Minnesota State Council on Asian Pacific Minnesota, and Mayor of Edina, Jim Hofland. Let's first welcome
morning, everybody.
Kelly, State Representative, to speak to us. Kelly was elected, first elected in 2018, and now 2018, and this is her second term. Would you introduce yourself a little bit to us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm really excited to be here and honored that you asked me to be a panelist this morning. So I'm Kelly Moeller, and I represent District 42A. That's the northern Ramsey County suburbs, and I have the cities of Shoreview, Arden Hills, Mounds View, and a little bit of Spring Lake Park. As Hong Yi said, this is my second term, so just finishing up our fourth year at the legislature. And we are a part-time state legislature, so when I'm not in session, I'm actually a prosecutor at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, and I've been working in prosecution and victim rights advocacy for about 20 years. I have two children who have either graduated from or in the Mounds View schools. And just like I said, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, Kelly, this is your fourth year. I just wanted to know, as a representative, how many bills have you drafted? And how many of them are being passed?
Yes, so I went back and did the math, and over the course of 4 years, I am the chief author of about 80 bills. I've signed on to a bunch more as a co-author, but I'm chief author of about 80. And in 3 years, I've had about 29 bills that have passed. And then I've got about 14 that are currently under consideration this year. We're in the process right now in the legislative session of voting on omnibus bills. And so a lot of my bills, either in the past or in the current session, have been rolled into other bills. So if you're going online to track the legislation that I've either drafted or that somebody else has drafted, I'm sorry to say that it's not easy to follow bills through the process because so many of them get wrapped in with other bills.
Wow, that's very impressive in 4 years. And it's a lot of work at that. Would you actually tell us, with that much work, how do you work with other legislators at the Capitol to get the work done?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's so important. And I want people to know that, you know, as much as we talk about partisan issues and our country so divided on so many things, that is very true. But at the state capitol, we actually get a lot of really good bipartisan work done. So we have a Democrat-controlled House, a Democratic governor, and a Republican-led Senate. And in the past couple of years that I've been there, we've passed our budget bills, which keeps the government moving. We've had a number of great bills that have passed both policy and funding wise. And we really get a lot of great bipartisan work done, especially in the committee process, where each legislator is assigned to a committees on different areas. And that's where a lot of the great work gets done. So me personally, when I have an idea for a bill, I need to figure out who in the Senate is the right author. And usually I'm seeking out a Republican senator since it's a Republican controlled Senate. And then I try to get other colleagues of mine in the House to join on. And I'm very close with a number of my Republican colleagues too, and try to get them to sign on to the bill, and not just sign on, but incorporate the feedback that they have to make the legislation even better. So have faith. We do have a really strong state government and we are getting things done.
That's really good to know. Otherwise, we'll just assume you're fighting at the Capitol all the time. And so you are elected as our representative, and actually I am one of your constituents. So I went to several of your town hall meetings. I guess that's one way to get connect. And then I also would like to know what are the ways that you work with your constituent to address their concerns and to hear their voice.
Yeah, again, a great question. So as you mentioned, we do town halls. We'll be doing door knocking coming up on campaign season. And so that's the best way to actually get to know constituents is show up at their doors. And so I encourage everybody, no matter where you live, no matter if you lean blue or red or you're independent, please, if somebody from a campaign comes and knocks on your door, whether it's the actual candidate or the volunteer, you know, we're out there just trying to make a difference. So please let them know what issues are important to you, because that's how we find out what our constituents care about. And we often, all of us have really easy contact information on the Minnesota Legislature website. And so I read and answer all my constituent emails. I try to answer all of them at least. So you definitely feel free to reach out to your elected officials via email or phone. And then, you know, the things that people email about or contact me about, that's my favorite part of the job, is working with constituents to solve a problem. Sometimes that results in legislation. Other times it's just we have really great staff and our staff can help resolve a problem. For example, people's driver's licenses were really delayed during the pandemic. And so we can connect with the right agency to make a phone call to find out where that is in the process. So sometimes we can really help people with things, again, doesn't require legislation. And then I just really enjoy hearing from constituents about what issues matter to them, and whether or not we're aligned, it's really helpful to me to know that. You know, sometimes people don't write because they say, oh, well, they have the same belief I do, so I don't need to tell them. But we really do want to hear from everybody, again, whether we have the same viewpoint or not. It's how I know if I'm doing a good job representing my constituents.
Thank you very much. I know you're very busy, and we really appreciate you are able to be part of this forum this morning. Next, we're going to welcome Sia, the Executive Director for the Minnesota State Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans. Hi, Sia. I know you're a little bit different than us, because most of the trainee, we know we are all immigrant. But most of us came here by choice. We came here for better education, more opportunity, and better life. And you are very different than us. You are forced to leave your homeland that against your will. Would you tell us your life journey a little bit?
Hong-Yi, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with all of you on this very beautiful morning. First, let me just thank all of you who are responsible for pulling together this dialogue during this month that we recognize across the country as API Heritage Month. It takes a lot of time on the part of anyone and everyone to pull together events of this nature. And so just simply thank you. And then to Representative Moeller and Mayor Hovland, thank you so much to the two of you for being here with all of our community members and myself and me. So Representative Moeller, I haven't had a whole lot of interactions with you since your time at the legislature. But I just want to say to all of the community members that are watching and listening to all of us, I want to start off my speech by personally attesting to the fact that contrary to popular belief, our legislators across the aisle do find plenty of opportunities to work together. And that's how our processes in our state, work. And, throughout the history of the state, that's how we have created the conditions that have allowed for people, like myself, refugees who came to this country with very little, oftentimes just the clothes on their backs, right, to overcome the circumstances of their point of entry, their story in their early days in America. And so thank you to both of you as elected officials for being a part of this conversation. As Hong-Yee said, I came to this country as a child, as a refugee, specifically speaking. My parents are by ancestry Hmong. Many of you on this call may know that in May of 1975, America withdrew from Southeast Asia. And as a result of the United States losing the Vietnam War, the Hmong became a target for political persecution by the communist regime that took over Laos, the Kingdom of Laos. And so my parents are my family are the casualties or the collateral damage, if you will, as a result of America's geopolitics or America's engagement in the geopolitics in Southeast Asia in the 60s into the 70s. I was 4 when my parents brought me into the United States. My family originally arrived we were resettled in California. And then in 1997, my parents decided to move our family to Minnesota because throughout our years in California, my parents had heard great stories about the state of Minnesota, the Midwest to be specific. And we, of course, had a number of family members who were resettled here or had moved here through secondary and tertiary migration. And we had heard that in the Midwest, where the manufacturing industry was relatively strong still by the 90s and the early 2000s, that here among Americans, Hmong parents have been able to find some semblance of stable employment opportunities. And we all know what stable employment opportunities mean for parents. It means that they can pay for a roof over their families' heads. They can put food on the table, and eventually, if they, with some time, they can open doors for their children that they might otherwise never be able to without that stable source of income, right? And so my parents decided, this is the very simple version of my story. As a refugee, I think it's safe for most people to assume that my personal story is very complicated and complex, but I'm giving you more of a public version of it. So my parents decided to relocate the family to Minnesota. And I want to say that my parents' decision to leave their native country behind and enter the United States as refugees was the second best decision, because the first best decision was on the part of my elders who decided to, enter the war as American allies, the secret war within the Vietnam War. The second best decision my parents made was to bring us to the United States. And then third best decision was to move us to Minnesota, because it was really here that my parents were able to stabilize the family in ways that they had not been able to in California. And so it was here that I really, begin to realize what life after high school would look like. And so that's the fast and furious version of my story as a refugee. But before I conclude right now, Hong-Yee, you mentioned or started off with saying that my story is very different from most of our community members who are present in this call, in this conversation. That is true in the sense that I am a refugee, and because of that, the circumstances that brought me and my parents and my siblings into this country are very different. Oftentimes they are so tragic that, were I to tell all of you what those circumstances were, you would think I was telling you, a book that I'd read or a Hollywood movie that I'd watched, right? But I want to say that we are all here together because this is the beginning of API Heritage Month. And API Heritage Month is about not only celebrating what makes each of our stories so uniquely ours, but telling the collective stories that we all have in common. And so you and I all, we, in addition to our physical characteristics, we have this story of, our stories speak to this question of what does it mean to be an American? And that's the strongest connector between all of us. And I would say that that overrides all of the differences that make us so uniquely who we are, whether we are Hmong ancestry, Chinese ancestry, or Italian ancestry. So I'll just leave it at that. I know you have other questions.
Right, that is great. I think that's why we are here. So now you are from a refugee to a leader in our API community. But I felt like we don't know about you or your agency that much. So I would like you to tell us a little bit more about your work and especially on your daily basis. What do you do?
So that's a fair comment to say that, many do not know as much about the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans. And I want to say that a part of the explanation for that is that Minnesota is so unique. There nowhere else in the other states that make up the United States of America and in any of the territories is there a comparable state agency to the Asian Pacific Council. We were created in 1985, and at the time, Minnesota's API population was less than 1%. Today, we make up about 6% of the state's total population. We were created in response and at the urging of community leaders as well as policymakers in response to, a number of reasons. One of the most important, as has been told to me by board members who were present in the early years of the council, that 1985 was about a decade after the end of the secret war and the Vietnam War in Laos. And so overnight, you saw an influx of refugees from Southeast Asia who, not to mention how socioeconomically, incapable they were, but really they, linguistically and culturally, the barriers were just countless, right? And so we were created in 1985 to serve as, to contribute to the capacity of state government as it goes about its governance activities. Since then, so in the early years of the council, I would say as an organization was very similar to its population. It did a whole lot of, programs, and it tried to do some policy advocacy and advising where the legislature and the governor are concerned. But over the years, the council has changed significantly, and particularly during my tenure as executive director, which began in 2013. The last time the legislature revisited the enabling statute, which is the law that lays out the parameters and the scope of authority for the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans, was 2016. Since then, my board has changed dramatically. We went from a 23-member board to a 15-member board. We have 11 board members who each represent one of the many Asian ancestry groups. Even though we know that were we to look at the community, we are arguably the most diverse community in the state and across the nation. We are known to be descended from people who came here from more than 40 nations. My 11 board members each represent one of the various ancestries. Our 5 largest communities have seats reserved on the board. So meaning the Hmong, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Korean, and now that I'm on the spot. Anyway, the 5 largest communities each have a seat on the board. So, and then the other 6 seats that are represented by community leaders are, are represented by leaders from, other Asian communities that are not, not one of the 5 largest. So the council right now in statute serves as the advisor to state government, specifically the legislature and the governor. We obviously don't get to all 200 plus legislators because that's a whole lot of legislators. And so we go about triaging our work according to what our biennial community survey indicates to us are the policy priorities of community members that participated in the survey. And according to legislators and their objectives, each biennium, oftentimes we hear the most from legislators who have significant, a significant percentage of API constituents. To your question about what a day looks like for me, really depends on what time of the year you're looking at, either me or one of my staff members. Right now, we, as Representative Moeller previously stated, we are trying to finish out the legislative session. And so the last day of the session is the 23rd, which means that my staff and I are following House floor debates, Senate floor debates, committee, hearings. We're looking at some of the policy ideas that are being discussed in committees. We're looking at drafting letters to help community members understand what is the governor proposing in terms of how to spend the $9.25 billion. What is the House proposing? What is the Senate proposing? And then also, prior to this conversation officially starting, I shared with all of you that today my community commitments include 4 community events, including this one. And so, I spent a lot of my time inside our various communities. I'm the public facing, member on my team, including my board. And so I try to spend, and I do spend a lot of my time inside communities because our communities are so diverse. That it's so important for me to be inside communities, to be present, to hear how they're doing, to understand what's important to them, not just this month, but this year, right? And so, I can be at the Capitol, I can be in meetings. I sometimes, and community members often are surprised to find that I'm in meetings, engaging in conversations with, for example, consulates from our Asian nations, because what happens there and what happens in these offices impact our communities here. And so that's, again, a quick, a very fast and furious, attempt on my end to answer your question. What does the Asian Pacific Council, what is the charge of the office, and what do I do as executive director on a daily basis?
Right, thank you. I have so many questions to ask you, but our time is up. All right, thank you very much. And then next we'll let Mayor Hofland to share with us. Thank you very much, Xie.
You're welcome.
Yes, good morning, Hong Yi.
Good morning. So you are a well-loved mayor. This is your 5th term. So let's talk about what does mayor do at Edina and how suburban city like Edina is operate.
Yes, thank you for that. Well, you can see some of the things I get involved in that were on the screen there on that screenshot. Some of those are self-inflicted because I've enjoyed local government so much. I've expanded what I've been doing both into the region and also nationally with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, where I also serve as the vice chair of the Standing Committee on Transportation and Communications. So I've loved this local government work that we've done. In our particular city, which is like many cities, like the city which many of you live in, we have a Plan B form of government. What that means is we're not like St. Paul, we're not like Minneapolis, they used to have a weak mayor, and now they've got a strong mayor. Our city works on the basis of the city council acting like a board of directors. And so we have a city manager, and the city manager is the only direct employee, if you will, of the city council. So the only person that the city council has direct authority over, whether it's hiring, firing, or ongoing job responsibilities, is that city manager. Everything else is an indirect sort of communication through the city manager. Although as a mayor, and you've been mayor, as long as I have, you have a lot of direct contact with many of the department heads as well. Before we go any further, I just wanted to say about my fellow panelists And thank you again for having all of us here at this May forum of the Edina Chinese Association. Really grateful that you're putting these on. Representative Moeller, I see about once a year at some legislative event, and it's just a delight to see her. She does excellent work over there at the Capitol. And regardless of what kind of an organization you have, and Ms. Herr and I have never met each other until this virtual experience, but who could ask for a better spokesperson than Ms. Herr representing an organization, no matter what that organization is? Just very, very impressive. And to come here as a refugee and have become so immersed in America and become so American over time, I think it's a relatively short period of time. It's remarkable. And I say that about all of you, really, because I see that in our own city with the Edina Chinese Association and all the work they did during the pandemic and how they immerse themselves in community. And everybody wants to feel like they belong somewhere, belong to something, and belong to each other, I think. And certainly in our community, that's the sense that I have of the folks that live in the Chinese American community that also live in Edina. So that's kind of fundamentally the way our city council works. We handle the budget, we do all the policy planning, and then for me, you know, you take on extra responsibilities as the manager or the mayor, as sort of the chief spokesman for your community. And so that's a heavy responsibility, a significant responsibility as well, representing your community, both at home and the face of your community on a broader basis too. So, and I take that responsibility very seriously.
Thank you, Mayor Hovland. So you have been mayor for many years, and Edina is famous for like a wealthy, white dominant community. So during all this year you have been mayor, what progress regarding diversity you have witnessed in the city of Edina?
Yeah, we do have that reputation, and I think it's true that we are a prosperous city, you know, and we've got a lot of successful people that live here. Our school district is renowned for its quality and our location. I would say those have been the two most significant things about Edina over time. The location in the Metropolitan District and then the high quality of the school district drives so much of the success that Edina's had over the years. And we're progressively seeing it become more diverse. If you look at the 2010 census data, you'd see a community that was 88% white and 12% African-American and other people of color. Now in the 2020 census, you'll see that we are now 80-20, 80% white, 20% people BIPOC. And that will continue to change, just like the world is continuing to change and becoming more and more diverse and more interesting in the process. I think our town is so much better off for having more people living here from different cultures and different ethnicities and different races. It creates so much interest and different points of view on the world that are so critical in helping make a good decision. I thought one thing that Representative Moeller mentioned that I was going to follow up on a little bit, which I thought was so important, and that is, you know, in ancient Greece, they not only created theater, but we know they created democracy. And that was the concept that all voices should be heard and all voices matter. Now, I get a lot of people that tell me when we make a decision, you didn't hear me. Well, I did hear you. I just didn't agree with you. And it's really important though, because it helps you make, as she pointed out, it helps you make a much better decision on what you're going to be doing. And the most recent example of that was this fire station selection. We need a new fire station in Edina. We had to do some things there that go through some processes that were really critical, including a lot of public input that allowed us to make a decision. In the terms of the growth in city employees, we're not tracking on the city employee basis the changing diversity of Edina. We're only about 6.4% diverse in our workforce, the city. So if we were going to match up, we'd be 20% diverse, and that's not due to ignoring that issue. We've got a person who's hired as a full-time race and equity coordinator named Heidi Lee, who resides in St. Paul and has had a history of working in these areas of race and equity and inclusion and diversity. We've got, we did some work in 2016 on the heels of a police arrest that drew some national attention. We went to work and looked at our race and equity profile, if you will, in the city as a how it affects all city operations and facilities and institutions. And we formed a group that was chaired by a person who was a African-American, James Pierce, who's now in the city council, and another person of color, Jesse Kingston. And they came up, that group came up with about 59 work plan items that the city could work on. And that was from 2018 to the present time. And we've got most of those items completed now we will have most of them completed by the end of 2022. We also have an equity value statement on the city website. It's been affirmed by the council. You can find that, and I can send you the link to that, which helps provide city council support on the race and equity work that's occurring across the city. There are various ways that the city has addressed this issue and trying to broaden the diversity of its workforce through ongoing recruiting and hiring practices, posting the welcome and inclusive statements on the city website, utilizing the League of Minnesota Cities website for job postings, increasing awareness and conversations with city hiring managers about candidate qualifications and skills. So this is something that we're constantly working on. We're not where we want to be, but it is something that we recognize is really critically important, and it's something that we want to get done.
Thank you very much. I think this is what democracy is about. We wanted to hear all the voices, and then we can agree or disagree, but we all wanted to do it in a respectful way. Thank you very much, Representative Kelly Moeller and Sia and Mayor Hovland. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm going to turn it back to Chen.
Okay, thanks. Okay. I just had one other thing I wanted to comment on quickly before we go on, and that is Ms. Herr coming to the United States as a refugee and talking about the story of the Hmongs in 1975. It reminds me of the Afghan story that we're facing now, and how Minnesota is so great at embracing people that have been friends to ours in their home countries. And now they have to leave. They don't want to leave, but they have to leave to protect their families and start a new life somewhere else. And the Hmong in 75, starting in 75, coming here, being embraced in Minnesota, continuing that journey towards being Americans, but never forgetting their heritage. We're seeing that same thing with Afghans now. And Edina is leading the way on that as well. We have a meeting every Saturday with the Afghan community folks that moved here, that were moved here by the federal government to try to help them assimilate as quickly as they can. So one of the things I'm going to do is stop by that Saturday meeting over at the community center, where we meet with, I think there's up to usually about 50 Afghans, primarily men. They're finding out what they need to do to assimilate themselves into American culture. You can see when you see them, they were at one of our parks the other day for the end of Ramadan and celebrating with their families. You could see the longing for home on their faces. It was apparent to me, you could see it, that they missed where they came from very, very much. But they were really grateful to be here. They were grateful to have their families in a safe place. They were grateful to have people that welcomed them and embraced them and said, hey, we're happy that you're here, and we're all going to be in this together. So let's embrace each other and move on through life together. So that's at least one way of putting it. Thank you for that little extra moment.
Thank you, Mayor Hovland. Hong-Yi, if I may just comment very briefly. Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership on the issue of the Afghan refugees. Most people don't know it, but our enabling statute tells us that the Afghan community falls under the umbrella of Asian Pacific Islander as well. And so that's one of our many communities. And my office was, part of the state task force that was created to help with the resettlement of the Afghan refugees in the state of Minnesota. And then my office is leading the roundtable on, that convenes once a week to make sure that organizations and individuals are sharing resources and information to help, with the resettlement of the Afghan communities. So thank you for your leadership on this. Anything and everything you can do in your capacity as mayor, to ensure that these new Americans settle in to Minnesota with as much of their dignity intact is so much appreciated. And I say that from a space that's deep in my heart as a refugee. It's so difficult to come to a new country, but it is so difficult to come to a new country knowing that many Americans, regardless of the color of their skin, that they may not necessarily want you here. And they don't know that once upon a time you were a warrior, that in your country, you were more than just someone who couldn't speak any English and don't hold 5 PhD degrees. And so thank you for your leadership on this issue.
Thank you. I'm going to put our Rotary Club in contact with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you very much. I will send the contact information for you guys.
Thank you, guys. Really, really great panel and a really good discussion. I think the most important message takeaway is our politicians are very normal people. Please engage them and support them, and they like to hear from